Hello everybody, Heather here. And today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different video. We're going to be doing a video about books. I know this isn't a book, it's an ebook. And all the books I read are in this, which Tom gave me for my birthday. Thank you, babe. So this summer I went offline for 3 months. I took my YouTube videos down. I didn't go on social media. I just needed a nice internet break. And one of the things I did with all that extra time was read. So I read 25 books in 3 months. I typically don't read that much. I don't think I've read 25 books in 5 years even. So to read 25 books in 3 months was excessive, but the whole experience was lovely. It was awesome. And today I wanted to make this video because I have some books that I really want to recommend, but then I also want to talk about the other books that I read as well. So in today's video, I'm going to break it down into 3 categories. The first is the must reads. The Heather says you should drop everything you're doing, get these books on your list at the top of your reading list and read them by the end of the year because they're that enjoyable, that life-changing. Like, please go read them. That's the first category. The second category is going to be the category. Not necessarily bad books, but just thoughts. I have some thoughts about these books. And then there's the great list. Like, these books were great. Definitely enjoyed them. Loved them even. But I can see how some people wouldn't like them necessarily. It's not something I would say, like, you should go get this now. And with that said, let's jump into the first category, the must-reads. For years, I have walked into libraries, I've walked into the Barnes & Noble, I've walked into the Borders, I've browsed libraries and bookstores, and this book is always on display somewhere, guaranteed. Dracula. And never did I have any inclination to read this book. Ever. I just figured I knew what it was about because Dracula is Dracula. We all know who he is, and I didn't really think that there was anything there is to it. Plus, I'm not a horror genre person. I'm not into like scary stuff. And then on top of that, Dracula is over 100 years old. So I was like, how good is it really gonna be in 2023? Oh my gosh. There is a reason why I'm starting out with this book because it was so freaking good. It was so good. I can't believe that this book has just been there, sitting there, right? Like, I just walked by it. How many times? And I could have read this earlier, and I can't believe I didn't, but I'm glad that I eventually did. And if you don't know anything about Dracula or you've never read it, like, it's so good. It is so good. I mean, there's things, there's definitely an age difference because, we're 2023 and this was written in the 1890s, but it totally holds up. It totally holds up. It's not scary in terms of gore and jump scares or anything like that, but oh my goodness, you definitely feel the tension building from the first chapter and all the themes that are discussed in terms of what motivates people and what love is and gender expectations and friendship and overcoming things. And it's just so I think because I only went in with assumptions. Obviously I'm not going to go read reviews about Dracula, but I just assumed I knew what it was about. I had no idea there was this completely whole other thing. And so if you don't know anything about Dracula, just go read it. I think you're primed. You are set up for the perfect experience to enjoy this book because it's totally not what I thought it was at all. I got it on, the Kindle. So now that I've seen the book after I've read it, it's a very thick book, but I read it in 2-3 days, I think. I just blasted through the whole thing because it was that much of a page turner. It was just I wanted to know what happened next. It had my attention the whole time. And just to be clear, Dracula by Bram Stoker, right? I think there's several books about Dracula and vampires. I'm talking about the original, the one that started it all. Dracula by Bram Stoker. All right, the next must read. This one, if you're not into the idea of reading a book from the 1890s, this book, I think came out this year. If not this year, then the year before. It's definitely a new book. And it's Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Tom read it first. and I don't know how he stumbled upon it. I think he is an Andy Weir fan. He wrote The Martian. And then Tom read it and just was like, he just could not stop talking about it. He was completely blown away. He was like, oh my gosh, like, read this book. So finally I read it, and yes, so glad I did. It was awesome. But the thing I would recommend is actually not to read it. I would say go and download the audiobook because it is damn good. We haven't finished it yet. After we both read it, we downloaded the audiobook, and it's just so good. Like the person, the voice actor who reads the book really brings it to life in a way that I would actually recommend. Consume the experience of Project Hail Mary as an audiobook. But, both of us read it first, and it was fantastic. And I would stress, like, don't read anything about it. Don't read the back of the cover. Don't read reviews. What I will tell you is that it's a book about like a existential earth threatening thing. It's sci-fi. But I promise, like, even if you don't like sci-fi, I think you would enjoy it. It's about the things that make us human, which, is always going to be enjoyable. This book sticks out to me as like one that feels like that's gonna be a classic. I think it's gonna be one that people are gonna be talking about for a long time because it's so unexpectedly different, and it's just so good. I don't want to talk more, I don't want to give anything away, but definitely just go check it out. All right, I dove into a lot of mysteries this summer, and one of them was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. This is also one that I don't want to give away. Obviously, it's a mystery, right? But this one had me physically in chills after I closed the cover. I just couldn't. I was in shock. Straight up, the first thing I did, because I was reading this in bed, I closed my Kindle, I sat up, and I was like, oh my God. And then I screamed to Tom, like, I was like, should I tell him to read it? I know it's not his type of book, but like, oh my gosh, it was so. Read it. It's good. Okay. If you've never read an Agatha Christie book, read this one. It's just, it's so unexpected. It's good. Read it. So the next three I'm actually going to lump all together. It's The Thursday Murder Club, The Man Who Died Twice, and The Bullet That Missed, which are all part of a series. There is a fourth one, which we haven't read yet, but all by Richard Osman. I had heard talk about The Thursday Murder Club. I think that's just, it was on the top book list. It's a bestseller. I think they're making a series out of it. And I had hesitated, and it wasn't until I saw one of PewDiePie's vlogs, actually, where someone, either Marty or PewDiePie, is reading it, because it was just like on the desk right there. And I was like, oh, that's a sign. I'll finally, bump that up my list and read it. And I'm so glad I did. Oh my gosh, all these books are hilarious. They're mystery books at their core, but they're so clever and witty and funny. And I was actually laughing out loud several times. I think I read all three, and then I was like, Tom, you just have to, you have to read them. He started reading them, and it's the same thing. He was like cracking up, and it was almost like being able to read them twice, because seeing Tom's reaction was like, going through it all over again. They're actually about murders that these 4 people who live in like a senior home try to solve together. So right there, that premise is like, you're going to be in for quite the ride. It's just so funny. And it's so it's so 2023, right? It's so now. And I think that was also like part of why I enjoyed it more, because I went from like Dracula 1890s, which was great. It was awesome to read a book that was, was that old, but then also to read a book that is so relevant to what we go through today and have it be so accurate. It was just so funny. And if you read them, I promise you they're going to fly by. Like, I don't think you'll ever be like, oh my gosh, this is dragging. Like, every chapter is just, it's like a little treat, like, oh, every character is so lovable that like you love hearing from each of their perspectives. And it's just so funny. I definitely recommend this series. Next up is Flow by, I'm not going to try to say his name. I think every human being on earth should read this book. And the reason why I say that is because I think it's important to know this experience that regardless of background, age, where you live in the world, your, socioeconomic status, whatever kind of person, like the study has been done across the board from people from all walks of life. And there is still this thing in common that people get into the state of flow, right? This flow state with things that they're into, whatever it is, whether it's sports, whether it's gardening, whether it's a hobby, whether it's their job, whatever. And I really wish I had read this book earlier because I understand what it means to get into the state of flow. I think hopefully everyone has experienced that when you're just in the zone, time passes, there's nothing else exists except for you and the thing that you're doing. You're just so in it. And part of the reason why I wish I had read this earlier is because a lot of the things that have put me into flow state, like vlogging, right? When I vlog, I am in flow. There's nothing else that I'm thinking about except for like what I'm recording or what I'm editing. I'm just in the zone. And a lot of the things that have put me in flow are things that like you don't have to do, right? So I would get the question of, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to start a YouTube channel? Why are you trying to vlog? What is the point? What is your end goal? Like, why are you doing this thing? And when people asked me why I was vlogging or, why I was doing what I was doing, it made me feel like the thing I was doing was wrong, right? Like, it's weird. Like, why are you doing this thing? And I felt like I didn't have a good enough explanation because there wasn't like I'm trying to be a million subscriber YouTuber or something like that. I don't know. It was fun. And I couldn't really explain it beyond that. But this book kind of validated, like, when someone is doing the activity that puts them into flow state, they become a more complex person. They feel like they're leveling up. They feel more accomplished. They feel like they're overcoming a challenge and getting stronger, regardless of what that thing is for you. Purely for that reason, right there is good enough. Like, that should be reason enough for you to do the thing that people might not understand. But there's so much more to it. So one of the things about a lot of the activities that put people into flow state is that people have to put themselves in some kind of position that could be dangerous, or they have to spend money, or they have to put in some kind of effort, or they might get hurt. Like, if you're mountain climbing, there's obviously some level of danger there, but like Tom and I are getting into hockey. We wake up at before 5 a.m. so that we can eat breakfast, stretch, warm up, get to the ice rink for practice at 6:30. No one is telling us to do that. There's no reason to do that, but people will go out of their way for the thing that puts them into flow state. So someone might find that bizarre and might not understand that. But when you know what it's like to be in a state of flow where you feel accomplished and challenged and you feel like you're getting stronger, it's like, it's almost like logically, why wouldn't you go out of your way to be in that state? Because you are becoming a stronger person. Another thing is that the activities are autotelic, which means that usually the person is doing the activity for the activity itself, not for some end goal, right? So like they use the example of a rock climber, like there is no peak that you climb and then you're done. You stop being a rock climber. No, you are a rock climber because you like climbing. Period, right? So when you're done with this mountain, it's another one, and it's another one, it's another one. And I love that because it's not like, okay, I will stop being a rock climber when I make this amount of money or get this many subscribers or whatever, achieve some goal where you cross the finish line and then you're done. No, it's like the activity itself, right? Like me editing a vlog, that is the fun part. Like that's the part that makes me feel like I'm pushing myself, or I'm, it's like I like seeing what I'm capable of. And there's only so many activities where I'm able to challenge my creativity and be excited about what I end up producing. So anyway, I can go on and on about this book, But if you're someone like me who has struggled with, self-doubt or anxiety, maybe you're a creative person and, you felt like you don't need a reason. I don't need a reason. But sometimes you need a reason, right? Like if you want the scientific research as to why you should continue pursuing that thing that puts you in a flow state, that book is it. All right, the last book on my must-read list is Wool by Hugh Howey. Wool is actually also a show on Apple TV, which is great, but I would definitely, it's very different from the book. So I would say that having read the entire series, Wool is the first book in the series called Silo. I will talk about the other two books in my next category. The show is on Apple TV and it's only done the first season. But having consumed all that is out there, I definitely think that the book Wool is the best out of everything. And it's just another really interesting concept. I mean, I think that's the thing about sci-fi, right? Is that it's these what if situations and you kind of get to explore what humans would do in these situations that aren't necessarily practical in today's world, right? And the way, like the premise of this book is so fascinating. Like it's just, it made me want to question like, oh yeah, what will these people do? What are these people doing? It is a post-apocalyptic. I can describe that much. I don't want to, give too much away, but it is post-apocalyptic, and that's not, anything new. We've seen that premise over and over. But the way that it is explained, and this story specifically was different, and it was, I don't know, it was really interesting. It definitely was like a page turner for me. I think this is another book that I blasted through because it was just so like, oh my gosh, I needed to know what the heck was happening. The one thing I'll say though is, as I mentioned, this book is part of a series. Read this book as if it were not. Now let's jump into the next category, the whom category. And we're going to start off with the other two books in the Silo series, Shift and Dust. Yeah, I just wouldn't recommend them. It's not. Whenever Tom and I talk about this, because it's funny, we did read a lot of the same books this summer, but this was another series that like I read and I was like, you gotta read this. So he started reading it. But whenever we talk about it, we can't just help and do this. Like we just like shake our head and we're just like, because it's like, you had it. You had such a good setup. You built the world out. You had the premise. The characters were strong. And then it just didn't. That's why I'm going to say, right? That's why this is in the home category. Because I guarantee if you read the first book, if you read Wool, you're going to want to read the second one. Because Wool is so good. You're going to be like, I have to know what happens next. You're just going to be disappointed. I'm sorry. And I hate to be critical because I'm a creator myself. I don't know what it's like to write a book. I would like to know what it's like to write a book one day. I can't say I know for sure what it's like, but I know what it's like to create something, to put your heart and soul into something. And so I never want to criticize, but let me put it this way. Book 2 and 3 were not like book 1. And I think that's what's so disappointing because there was such a disconnect. What I would do, okay, is read Wool and then go write your own fan fiction and come up with what could have happened in book 2 and 3 by yourself. Next up is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. So this one, I think, was the first book I read when I, took my online break, I guess I should say. And I was in a bad place. So I needed to start with something that was breaking the habit of being yourself. I felt like I was kind of in a pattern of negative thinking. And so, yeah, that's what I gravitated to first. And honestly, I really liked the book. It was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. I would recommend the book But the reason why I'm not is because there are a lot of parts that I disagree with, just straight up. I think there's a lot of parts where like I would not have said it this way, or I wouldn't have used that example. It's not something that can just be boiled down to like the power of positive thinking. It's not that simple, which is why I really liked it, because it actually made sense to me in terms of like the power of thought and how it can influence your actions and what comes into your life and stuff like that. But there was this one example that was like, oh yeah, this person was down and out, financially unstable, and then like did the thing and basically won the lottery. And I was like, no, dude. I mean, maybe if that is an actual thing that happened, awesome. But it's just like it leaves a bad taste in my mouth for people who struggle with like gambling addiction and finances, right? Like, I think it's more complicated than that. But for the things that I was going through, it totally helped. Like, I'd go so far to say it was life-changing in that moment. I really needed to hear it. But because there's just some parts of this book that I'm like, that's why it's in the category. And to be transparent, I actually didn't even read like the second half of the book that's all about meditation. Like, I think the second half is like the thing that you're actually supposed to do, but I was more interested in the theory and like the brain and thought and all of these things. Like, I wanted to kind of read more about that. There's one part of the book that Tom and I always reference, and it's this idea of like the quantum surprise, where like if you're open, you never know how the universe is going to surprise you, right? So if you think that you go into a situation and you think that it's going to be a bad situation, then guaranteed to be a bad situation. But if you go in and you're open, right, and then you act as if you're open to anything, who knows what can happen? And we feel like that happens to us a lot. It's like, oh my gosh, what are the chances of this thing happening? But because it's like we're trying to be open, we're going with the flow. That was all stuff that I needed to hear at the time. So if that resonates with you, I'd recommend it. Okay, and then the last two books in this category, I'm actually going to lump together. They are completely unrelated. They're not part of a series, but they gave me the same vibe. So if you want like just a feel good, this is a good, like, I don't know, life lesson kind of a fiction story, you can read these. It's The Midnight Library and Where the Forest Meets the Stars. I wouldn't recommend them to everybody because they kind of felt almost forgettable. Like the stories almost were just like, okay, that was, I finished the book and I don't really have any thoughts aside from that. The Midnight Library I actually enjoyed more. But yeah, like Where the Forest Meets the Stars, I was like, okay, like, cool. On to the next one. There was nothing like thought-provoking about it, which is why it's in the category. Maybe I should have put the Midnight Library in the other category. I don't know, either way. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the last category, the great category. I really, really enjoy these books. I'd go so far to say I love some of these books, but I can see how not everyone would recommend them. I think it's like a preference, it's a taste, all of that. I'm going to try to go through these pretty quickly. All right, here we go. First up is Fairy Tale. This was actually the very first Stephen King book I have ever read in my entire life. But for some reason, like when I took my online break, one of the things I felt like I was gravitating towards was trying to learn more about people who are really good at their thing that they do. And for some reason, I can't even remember why, but Stephen King stuck out to me as someone who writes that is really good at it and has done it for decades. I know nothing about Stephen King. I've already mentioned I'm not into horror. I don't, It and all the other things he's written carry I'm freaking no interest. I'm assuming that Stephen King's horror is actually scary. It's not like, Dracula 1890 scary. It's like, modern scary. Hell no. I'm not gonna be up in bed at night, like, no, reading about the clown in the sewer or whatever. No. But I can appreciate someone who writes a lot and has obviously developed the craft over the years. And so when I found out that Stephen King actually has a fantasy book, I was like, okay, I'm on board. It was so much fun. It was definitely an adventure. It was just so much fun. It was cool to like finally read something by him. It's a really thick book. Stephen King, it's a thick book. And like if you're not into fantasy, you know, I can see how you wouldn't like it, which is why it's in the great category. I felt like I did take away a lot from the way that he writes and the way that he describes situations and the character development, all of that. And I actually went on to read his memoir. It was like a writing guide. It's called On Writing, a memoir of the craft, which he actually wrote in the 90s, I think. So it's an older book. That book I should actually move to the must read. Like, especially if you're a content creator, I think like writing is so relevant to making content, because each piece of content that you're creating is basically writing a story. And so yes, you can say that I make vlogs for me, and it's because it's for me, I'm the one who decides what goes in and all of that. But no, I'm also very conscious of the fact that there is an audience there. I am making these videos to be watched by people, right? And so hearing how he approaches how to make something compelling and interesting and how to make writing more effective was actually like super helpful. I mean, I definitely recommend that book. And then Fairy Tale was kind of like the example of him putting it into practice. And then after I read On Writing, I read The Elements of Style, which is like, I think the go-to writing guide. It's an old book that people have referenced forever. And I read the whole thing in an hour. I think it's something that like everyone should read once. It is old, so some of the stuff is like we don't even talk like that, but just seeing the examples of like here's like the ineffective way to write it, and then here's the effective way to write it. I appreciated that class as a 38-year-old content creator. You know, it was helpful, but I get that you know, not everyone is into learning how to improve their writing. All right, moving on. Agatha Christie, I did The Mysterious Affair at Styles and Death on the Nile. I'm just trying to go through all of them. They were great. And other than that, I don't have much to say. If you obviously, I think if you like Agatha Christie, you've probably read them already. They were awesome. Next up, Little Women. Oh my gosh. Little Women is another one of those books that was like Dracula, because literally next to Dracula is usually Little Women, because it's always the classics section that's on display. And I've never had an interest, and especially someone who like has considered herself a tomboy for a lot of my life. A book about, called Little Women is not something I'm necessarily going to gravitate to. But oh my gosh, I so wish I had read this book in middle school, high school, and it's sad because I was a reader in high school. I liked to read for fun, and I wish this one was assigned reading, because again, I wouldn't have picked it up on my own. Not only was it so enjoyable, but Jo, who's one of the main characters, she's one of the Little Women, is like my favorite person in the entire world. She's one of my favorite people that I've ever met, be it reality or fantasy world. She's like just such an awesome character that I resonated with so much, and I wish I had her as a role model growing up, because she just does things differently. She doesn't necessarily fall into the expectations of societal norms, but not in a bad way, right? Not in like a rebellious, like, you're a punk kind of way, but in a way where she's still smart. She's still a great, daughter and sister and friend. And, she has her own passions that she's also pursuing. And like, I don't know, I really wish I had that as an example growing up. I think this book is the oldest one I've read, like out of these 25 books. Maybe ever. I'm sure there was a book in school I had to read that was older. Let me pull this up. Little Women. No, not the movie. The book. When was Little Women written? 1868. Okay. And Dracula, I believe, was 1897. Okay, yeah. So Little Women is the oldest book that I've read in recent memory. It took me a while. I started it and I was like, a couple chapters in, I was like, I don't get it. I almost gave up on it. I was so glad I didn't. Oh my gosh, it definitely got to the point where it was like, oh, this is my comfort. It's just like, it's just good for my soul. All right, more sci-fi. I read Foundation by Isaac Asimov. Yeah, I think he's the same guy who also wrote like the original iRobot. Actually, I think the reason why I found this is because I watched the Silo series on Apple TV, and then like underneath that was the Foundation series also on Apple TV, and I looked into it and I was like, oh, this is based off a book. It's based off a series, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna read the book first. It was really good. It's definitely sci-fi and it's an older book, but I can see how it was like genre defining for its time. I was like, oh wow, this is great. This is different. It's different. It was really interesting. Same with The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. I had no interest to read it ever. I think I would say I preferred The Time Machine because I've never thought about the future that far, right? Like we go several tens of thousands of years into the future in The Time Machine. When we talk time travel, it's like 100 years from now, maybe 1,000, but we go like the Earth becomes like completely different. Animals have evolved. Humans don't look like humans anymore. Like it was really interesting to see just a portrayal of like, all right, let's go there. What does everything look like, sound like? What does the world look like? It was so cool. It was like, wow, you kind of felt like you were in the time machine and just like, it's like it wrote like a movie or read like a movie. It was like, whoa, now we're here and this is what this guy is doing. He's trying to figure it out. And it's a short book too, like both Foundation and The Time Machine. So I would recommend it, but I get how it wouldn't be for everyone. Next up is Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting book. This book was actually recommended to me by Tom. He read it first. I think he found it because he was literally looking for books like on Google that was like best feel good books or books that make you feel good or whatever. And this one came up. And so he read it and then he was like, you should read it. It's just a good bedtime story, right? Like we're trying to fall asleep. We don't need a lot of action and a lot of tension. Like we just need something that's like very slice of lifey, but still interesting where you're not completely just passing out when you hold the Kindle. And this is definitely a feel good book in a good way, right? Like there's enough plot where it's memorable, the characters are memorable, but it's also very satisfying and like not predictable, but like everything gets taken care of in a very satisfying way. And so yeah, it was a great book to have as a bedtime story. All right, and then the last three I'm actually going to lump together as well. It's The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, The Weed That Strings the Hangman's Bag, and A Red Herring Without Mustard. All of these are by Alan Bradley, and they're part of the Flavia De Luce series. I really like mystery. I think if I were to say what my favorite genre is, it would probably be mystery. That's probably the one I've read the most, but I was trying to find modern mystery because I was also reading a lot of Agatha Christie, so I kind of just wanted to like have the contrast of, then and now. And I stumbled upon Alan Bradley's books, and Flavia De Luce is an 11-year-old detective, I guess. The stories revolve around her. She's 11, and really, if I were to describe her, she's a chemist. So she's like super obsessed with science and chemistry, and she's very book smart because she's so logical and methodical and is also very smart. She kind of finds herself in these situations where she can't help but like know what is happening, and because she's 11, the adults underestimate her and stuff like that. So what I really like about these books is that it is a child, but the books are written for adults, right? So it's not like, Harry Potter is, I think catered towards kids. Adults can enjoy it as well, but it tends to be, I think it's written for kids. This is about a kid, but it's written for adults. They're all like recently written, but the setting is in the 1950s, and so it's also written that way. So there were times where it's not an easy read like the Thursday Murder Club. I had to read a little bit slower, but that doesn't mean that it's any less enjoyable. They're all really great, clever mysteries, and they were also good ones to read before bed because, again, enough of a plot, but it's an 11-year-old, so like, no one's, well, it's a murder mystery, but in terms of like, characters I care about, there's no like crazy surprise death or whatever. Those are the 25 books I read this summer. They were all great. There were some that were questionable, but either way, it was so much fun just getting lost in books. It was exactly what I needed. It was nice to kind of like meet all these new friends, like get into all these different kinds of situations. And honestly, I do feel like it did improve my creativity and my writing. Just being able to read from all these different genres and styles and even time periods of when they were written. So much fun. And if you decide to get any of the books on this list, or you've read some of the books on this list, I'd love to know your thoughts. So let me know in the comments. And with that said, I will catch you in the next one. See ya. Bye.